Hey, good morning, guys. So as you know, tomorrow is the Unit 2 test, so today's video is going to be a review about solving each type of equation. I don't want to waste too much time, so let's just get to the first one and start solving. So we're starting off with a linear equation. What you do first for these is anytime you see parentheses, you want to get rid of those. And we do that by distributing whatever is on the outside. So we're going to have to do that twice. When I get that done, negative 2 times 4 gives me negative 8x. Negative 2 times negative 11 gives me positive 22 equals 3x. 2 times 5 is 10, and 2 times negative 7 is negative 14x. Then we would combine our like terms. On the right side, I have two terms that have x's, so we're going to combine those. So that would give us negative 11x plus 10. Now that there's x's on both sides, I want to fix that. So we're going to add 11x to both sides. And that gives me 3x plus 22 is equal to 10. Let's move that 22 by doing the opposite operation, so subtraction. 3x equals negative 12. One last step, divide by 3. So x is equal to negative 4. Okay, the one right next to it is absolute value. With these, you can treat those absolute value bar as parentheses, but that's actually not the right thing to do. What you want is to isolate. So these bars and everything in between them has to be by itself. So the 2 and the negative 8 need to move over. So let's start with the 8. We do opposite operation, so we're going to add. That leaves me with 2 times the absolute value of 3x plus 5 is equal to 20. Then that 2 out front, we're going to divide it out. So that leaves me with absolute value 3x plus 5 is equal to 10. So by definition, absolute value turns everything positive, whether what was in here was positive or it might have been negative. So we need to account for both possibilities. So we're going to separate this. 3x plus 5 equals 10. So all I did was take away those bars. The other possibility is 3x plus 5 equals negative 10. So this time, it's just a negative answer. And now we're going to solve both of these. We would subtract our 5 and divide the 3. So this one gives me a fraction, x equals 5/3. Let's do the other one. So same thing, subtract 5, but this time it gives me 3x is equal to negative 15. Then divide by 3. So x is equal to negative 5. Those are my two answers. On the test, it is multiple choice, so they're going to write it as a set. X equals curly bracket, and it's always going to go least to greatest, so it'll be negative 5, comma, 5/3. Okay, the next two, they're going to be linear and absolute value again, only this time around, they're not going to be equations. They are inequalities, so see that? But that, honestly, it doesn't really make a difference. We're going to solve it the same exact way. So starting with this negative 3 needs to get distributed inside the parentheses. So that'll leave me with 8x minus 12x plus 15 is less than or equal to 23. Then we would combine our like terms. So I have two terms that have x's. That'll be negative 4x plus 15 is less than or equal to 23. We'll move our 15 by doing the opposite operation. So we're going to subtract. Negative 4x is less than or equal to 8. Divide by negative 4. So here something special is going to come up. Since we are dividing by a negative number, we have to flip that symbol. So x is greater than or equal to -2. So just make sure that you keep an eye out for that. When you divide by negative, flip the symbol. Okay, so solving it is kind of easy, but we need to actually see this on a number line as well. So I have a number line here. It's kind of blank, but we're going to fill it in. The only number I care about is the -2, so let's say that's -2. Then if I were to fill out the rest, it would look something like this. Okay, let's start by putting a circle at our value. So we said -2. Now you have to decide, should I just leave it like that open or do I need to color it in? This one is underlined, so that means color in. Then do I need to shade in the left side of that point or the right side of that point? So since it's a greater than symbol, the greater numbers are always to the right. But also another tip is if you look at the symbol, it kind of looks like an arrow that points in the direction that you need. Okay, now let's do another inequality. This time it's absolute value. We need to isolate those absolute value bars. So the only thing that we need to move over is the 8. Opposite operation says that I would need to add it. So that leaves me with absolute value of 3x plus 6 is less than 18. From here, we're going to do our two equations again. 3x plus 6 less than 18. So all I did was take off the absolute value bars. But the other one, 3x plus 6, we're going to flip the symbol, make the number negative. So you have to do both. Flip symbol. And then it has to be a negative number. Okay, now from here we are going to solve. So subtract 6 from both sides. 3x is less than 12. Divide by 3. X is less than 4. Then on the other side, subtract 6. 3x is greater than -24. Divide by 3. X is greater than -8. So those are our two answers, but we need to put them on the number line, least to greatest. So I'm going to say this is -8 and this is 4. Let's put our circles. And should I color in the circles? Well, this time around, I do not have a little underline underneath. It's just regular, so no, they're going to stay open. And then I shade in between. And I know for a fact there is a question like that on the test, so make sure that you are able to identify what kind of circles and which direction you color in. Okay, let's look at the next ones. So the next two are probably the hardest ones on the test. Rational equations. So rational, the hardest step is the first step. Once you're past the first step, it's kind of smooth sailing from there. But our first step is finding the lowest common denominator. Or in other words, the lowest common multiple of the bottom of each of these fractions. So if you look at the bottoms, I know it's called least common multiple, but that's kind of misleading. You want to look for the biggest number. So in this case, out of 9, 18, and 2, 18 is the biggest number. And you also want the variable with the largest exponent. So I have x squared, and x. So x squared is the biggest. So that is also going to be part of our lowest common denominator. So now we're going to get that, and we're going to multiply the entire equation by that. So 18x squared times 8 over 9x minus, again, the 18x squared times 11 over 18x equals, one more time, 18x squared times 3 over 2x. So what I did was, in purple is the original problem, see? And then in pink is the lowest common denominator. So now we're going to actually multiply this. But because it is fractions, you'll see that a lot of this stuff is going to cancel out. So for instance, on that first one, I know that 18 can be written as 2 times 9, and x squared can be written as x times x. So that makes it a little easier to see that the 9's are going to cancel, and one of these x's is going to cancel. So what are we left with? A 2, an x, and an 8. And when you multiply all of those together, that gives you 16x. Okay, so now on to the next one. This one's a little bit easier. 18 cancels with 18. X squared cancels with x squared. So only thing that we have right here is just the 11. So minus 11 is equal to, then here, same as before, 18 is 2 times 9. X squared is x times x. So that means I can cancel out the 2, and I can cancel out both x's. So all that I am left with, oh, I'm sorry, it shouldn't have been x squared. Let's fix that. Okay, there we go. I've written it wrong. It was supposed to be x. So all I did was fix that. Okay, so only one x gets canceled. So what we're left with is 9x and 3. So when you multiply that, gives you 27x. So from here, it's just a linear equation. I think this is easier to solve. There's x's on both sides, so what I'm going to do is subtract the 16x. So that's negative 11 equals 11x. Then divide by 11, because that's what's in front of the x. Gives me negative 1 equals x. There is our answer. X has to be negative 1. So like I said, this is the hardest part. This here, finding the lowest common denominator. But after that, it's pretty simple. So let's practice one more time. Here's another rational equation. We need to find the lowest common denominator. So looking at the numbers, 4, 2, and 8, 8's the biggest, so we're going to have to include 8. Then look at the variables. We want the one with the biggest exponent, so x squared. So that means that our lowest common denominator is 8x squared. Let's multiply everything by that. So 8x squared times 5 over 4x plus 8x squared times x minus 6 over 2x squared equals 8x squared times 18 over 8x squared. So in purple is the original problem, in blue is the lowest common denominator. So now let's go cancel some stuff out. 8 can be written as 2 times 4. X squared is x times x. So now we can see that 4 cancels with 4. X cancels with x. And we're left with 2x and 5. When I multiply those, that gives me 10x plus. Now let's do the next one. Again, 8 can be written as 2 times 4. So 2 cancels with 2. X squared cancels with x squared. And we're left with 4 and x minus 6. So 4 times x minus 6 equals, on the last one, everything cancels, 8 and 8, x squared and x squared. So just the 18. Okay, so now let's simplify this. We never want parentheses, so let's multiply that in. Combine our like terms. Move that 24 over by doing the opposite operation. and divide by 14. So let me put this in the calculator really quick. I'm not sure what this is. That gives us 3. So our answer here is 3. So just a warning, on the test, it's mostly multiple choice. There are three questions at the end that are open answer. And guess what? It's one of these. So you have to know how to solve these for the open-ended question. Okay, but we still have some more to go, so let's see. Next one's up are radical equations. You need to isolate the house. So since there's a 2 out front, the first thing we need to do is divide by 2. And that leaves us with the square root of 5 minus 8x is equal to 3. Now, in order to cancel out that house, we are going to square. So 5 minus 8x, no longer underneath the radical, is equal to 9. And all that's left is to move the 5 and the 8. So we move the 5 by subtracting. We're left with negative 8x equals 4. And we move the negative 8 by dividing. This is still going to be a fraction answer, only we're going to simplify it. So this actually comes out to negative 1/2. Okay, now let's do the one right next to it. Whoop. One right next to it. Another one with radicals. It might seem harder because there are radicals on both sides, but it's actually easier because I can go straight to the step that says that we square everything, and that will cancel out those radical symbols. And it just turns into a linear equation from here. There's x's on both sides, so to fix that, let's move the 2. We are going to subtract it. Then let's move the constants over to the other side. So we're going to add 11. And let's get rid of the coefficient. So divide by 5. X is equal to 4. Okay, after this, we started going into complex numbers, meaning that there's a real part and an imaginary part. So if I wanted to add these, so this one has a plus sign in the middle, we would just combine like terms. So real part has to go with the other real part. So 4 plus 2 is 6. And then imaginary part has to go with the other imaginary part. So that would be negative 3 plus invisible 1 here. So negative 3 plus 1 would give me negative 2, so it would be minus 2i. So that one is fairly straightforward. As you can see, I didn't really even have work to show. The other thing with complex is you have to be able to multiply them. So if you are more comfortable using the box method, you are free to do that. It works. But I'm going to use FOIL. So FOIL. Those letters stand for first, outside, inside, last. So if I take my first numbers, 2 times 7 is 14. Then if I take my outside, so 2's on the outside, and negative 2i is on the outside. So that would be negative 4i. Now, I for inside, so 3i times 7, that gives me plus 21i. And then L for last, so it'd be the 3i times negative 2i, which gives me negative 6i squared. Special note here, I squared is equal to negative 1. That is something you have to remember. So I can go in and replace that I squared with a negative 1. Then let's actually multiply it. So negative 6 times negative 1 would give me positive 6. And then from here, we can combine like terms. So the real numbers, 14 plus 6 is 20. and then the imaginary numbers. Negative 4 plus 21 gives us 17. So that is our answer right there. 20 plus 17i. So another heads up, one of the open-ended questions is this question here. Okay, and last two are quadratics. We learned 3 different ways, but only 2 of them are going to be on the test. So these are the only 2 that I'm going to go over. So quadratic formula and solving by completing the square. Quadratic formula, it's in your notes, and it's going to be an open note test, so I'm not worried about you guys memorizing it, but just in case we need it, negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. So when you look at your equation, as long as it's written in standard form, it goes in order. So that invisible 1 that's right here, that's our a. Then b is 12, and then c is 6. So we're just going to get those 3 numbers, and we're going to plug them into the corresponding parts of the equation. So that would give me x equals negative 12 plus or minus 12 squared minus 4ac, so 4 times 1 times 6. All of that is underneath the square root. All over 2 times a, so 2 times 1. You are welcome to try typing that into the calculator and seeing if you get a whole number. But, I mean, I think you'll be able to see the answer choices. You're not going to have whole numbers as answer choices. They are all still in radical form. They're going to be irrational numbers. So your calculator is not going to help you that much. You're going to have to simplify this on your own. So if we do that, x equals negative 12. I don't really need those parentheses. Plus or minus. The denominator, 2 times 1 is 2. So the hard part is the discriminant. So everything that's inside the house. So if I were to try to do that here, 12 squared is 144 minus 4 times 1 is 4 times 6 is 24. So 144 minus 24, that gives me 120. Okay, so unfortunately, 120 is not a perfect square, but I am more than sure we can simplify it. So let's make a factor tree. I would do 2 times 60. 60 can be split up again as 2 times 30. Then that would be 2 times 15, 3 times 5. So that's as much as I can split it up. But if a number shows up twice, which it does, there's a 2 there, we can pull it to the outside. The rest of these are all singletons. They're all by themselves. So that's going to have to stay inside. So now I have x is equal to negative 12 plus or minus 2 on the outside. Radical, multiply all these together. So 30 over 2. I promise we're almost done simplifying. So the last thing is that you should notice that 12, 2, and 2 are all even. So that means that I could actually simplify this even more. So treat it as 2 separate fractions. Negative 12 over 2 would be negative 6 plus or minus. Then if I did it the other way, 2 over 2 is 1. I don't need the 1 anymore. I could just write the radical 30. This is my final answer. So negative 6 plus or minus square root of 30. Okay, and last one. Solve by completing the square. So when you complete the square, this one is unique in that I don't want it to equal 0. I want it to equal the constant. So we're going to move that over. 2x squared plus 12x is equal to positive 8. The other thing about completing a square is that we do not like it when there is a number out front. So we're going to divide everything by whatever that number happens to be. So for us here, it's a 2. So that gives me x squared plus 6x. I'm going to leave some space because we're going to put something there, equals 4. Okay, so in that space, here's the whole thing that makes completing the square work. B over 2 squared. So in this case, our b is 6. So 6 over 2 squared. That would be 3 squared, which is 9. So we are going to add 9 to both sides of the equal sign. This makes it to where you can factor this as a perfect square trinomial. 4 plus 9 is 13. So the hard part is actually figuring out what goes in there. So I need a number that when you add it equals 6, but when you multiply it is 9. Turns out that that number is 3. The easiest way to do that is it's up here. Whatever was inside before you squared it. So positive 3. Okay, we need to square root. So that'll make the house cancel out with the exponent, x plus 3. And then on this side, 13 is not a perfect square, but can I simplify it? So can I split it up? Well, it turns out that it's a prime number, so no, I can't. That's all that's going to happen. So it's going to stay square root of 13. Just be sure that you put plus or minus in front of it. And last step is we're going to subtract the 3 from both sides. We're going to put that number out front. So x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 13. Okay, and this is also one of the ones that you're going to have to do by hand, no answer choices. Okay, and that is it for our review. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you guys tomorrow.